영지 전부 zordan 님이 장 zon을 문음 전부는 저도 바가로 다른 잔도 셔마도 돈바 되지 잔라기 좀 저러네 저러 저링이 정감서 저어 되지 셔나 예라만 지메 반조 자라 소라 고gonjo toban phawra shinje lo gonjo toban phawra shinje lo gonjo toban phawra shinje lo.
Profound and subtle Dharma is rarely encountered in eons. Now we can hear and follow it. May we realize the Tathagata's meaning. To liberate all the sentient beings, please give rise to the unsurpassed and supreme bodhicitta.
Tirkudur mi badi tse tarjinandan jijar bukchukudogbo di sanji chondan de landarkato sorab zambab chondan de dokirsavi lena zamang mar nam jikchukudogbo yin la semchin de dokjewadan chiwi tse tamchidnab dagla wangwa yino shirib dokka semke pa na semchin de dagla shinda pambar driparin dodnayang semchin de dokka guba gomba martogne kewadan chewa niki tsenagan dewa topra majirdo teji jirjinan zamolon marnam tomar kewi tse kebadan wadme kanjik kewaran doba tak gewele lafzon de rang nyenkordan kantimar namsa tagbarshina di yirladan jibdag changme parnam nibrshede mawani kap chongren gerajan dewa topni nyenkor namlayan pamran gero 대양 샘친 사때 디 샤트그남 추급제비 마라 정월 마샤고 가르테 띠르 시상 닌니르 남 디데 샤창라 롱수 쇼바당 얼러당 가르당 롤몰라 소비르 남브가 양와 나초라로나 마와 니캅데와 토브르 만교로 디지지르제나 웹츠 강직제비 체 링안당 돈극당 종보장 메바지 락네 디 mẹ tí trưng avi chắc là rùa đốt na yang, đã cất ngắm mồ này yết la đằng zít đằng nằm chân để mà vào ní cả trung hoa đằng để đằng là dewa đằng phàm bờ chụp bờ xí bago, để từ dewa thô bờm thôn áp sunum kia ghi lem chế để lep chụp để yết la zít đằng than chế nam la yang, các trong số bờ rừng na gang, các chất tê lê đốt để nhẹ nhẹ nam đi để xem chân số bờ xí na tí rangshi ranglar membe mawag nika nopran jirwa yuno zamon lang semchin kanjik tsempuwa na gewa chonzit jiba gamar digbab jiba kanzig kangyong rong dagna tedak tsempune ngansung gone sir tongur mandod na dagna tedak tsempune mandod na yang Gangdak gestab jibi kanzig namna dagla yang nibar perwe tedak ngansung dur tongur mandod par mujibgu zamolong semjin kanzig gewa jiba tak tsempuba na tela ngansung done bi lan je gyapchuk tongchuk mongbo di pami gzigsir na wagam nyenkur gzigsir na war shene ngansung gone se chibr shiba yinna ngusir digbab sagbi kanzig de ngansung gone se chiban mumago so zumbab jondan de tertin zamolong wagam mo kanjing pu tsempuba na di nambar shi bar nam maksir jang gewa dang digbir nam jig mashi ba dang mug dang nawe jang tongtu me pe te nyenkor nam ji shu ti chet chobar je chen barwa dang do tam ba khlo ba dang san je dang shang chip san kum chan jo ba la su giwi sa jabna ti shu te yang ngang sung go ni le tharwa dang dut dang lan ji chog nam jang rangshik jin thorwen gero zumbab jondan den dartar daqq taqbara sharte semjin kanjig namjig sempubi che sempubana sanji jin san laqchi tubadan san shangchib san khum san laqchi tubadan taqba jimbum dorde tsichik kam tsigjig chik tubara gerna samme par ngapshi kanzig maqtu jan ngansong dur tong digbab sigbi kanzig yen yang tenit yonsu chorun gero tenit jondan de ji çoku dağbu nri gerpo la karsarwa kyonu shamba chimbodan be tertir shamba sem kene kiadan chevi semsin nam chongur shiba yino maun jikten namsir kibadan vedme kanjig kibadan chivitse kyoki sem kitan ba tenit menibir semsin nam jarte xtanjib devalan go proshawo tenin nri gerpo sanjib chondan de la sorwa da kachchın su vardı shirmir dogba sem kete Kachik riri vijindan zamolong semchin nam chongur shebadan kiwadan chiwi tsenayang semchin dedag pambalang gopa yino tertanayang semchin dedag kiwadan chiwi tsenayang dog tsigla yit chibir shine thara matoba da pamba matoba medo in chibir shina di tse sanjib jondon de jushan jusan wa sai nyang bola kasara chukudo bon rei gerbon don ngun serb gerton namsen rei gerbo kirde kiadan chibi semchen nam chungru shiba yono kiwe chimbo ndola der trip shamba dan nyangje dor molum gir topdan dan tarnadan rei gerbo zisir nawa yinna ya ngusu ter malaso Tartib kara gyadang danchi jis danyad san gyenim san devjang shabam samame ba jib shawo tif karwi mangla devadang jangam gi mangla yang takbra ne ba jib shawo di tse san gi tif kitse tsatyang karab jotume ba yono sai nyambo rei gerbum zapana sam gi me ke ba yenla dertal hadang min roar nam jarwi changjang jarda medo sai nyambo tsav monam gim dole xinji gerbo nam gi tot chang ngbi legar te yabago
Before we begin our teaching on the Ksitigarbha Sutra, I would like to share a few words with all of you. For everyone here at Larungar, all of you should understand and recognize the great importance of studying and contemplating the Dharma, as well as the necessity of corresponding practice. At the same time, we sincerely hope that everyone who resides here will make every effort to attend Dharma teachings regularly, whether these are my lectures or teachings offered by other Khenpos and Khenmos. It is truly beneficial if you can maintain a sense of discipline and commitment, because in this way, it will certainly benefit your own study and practice in every aspect. This will definitely bring you great help and support. Otherwise, just as we discussed the day before yesterday, habitual tendencies are like a rolled up piece of paper. The habitual patterns from before, such as distraction, excessive sleep, and laziness, will continue in this way. And as a result, you may lose the precious opportunity to receive the nectar of the Dharma teachings. You may miss this rare opportunity completely. Everyone must truly pay attention to this matter, except for a very few individuals who are genuinely very busy serving the Sangha with their volunteer work. All of you should try your best to maintain certain requirements for yourselves. In this way, you will not waste your precious time. This is one aspect. There is also another aspect that I would like to address with all the Dharma friends here, as well as everyone who is present listening to these teachings right now. I sincerely hope that all of you will learn to cherish and treasure your time, because our human life is truly very short and precious, and each person, whether engaged in study and contemplation or daily practice, has many responsibilities and is very busy. Therefore, we must learn to cherish our own time. And at the same time, we must also learn to consider and respect other people's time as well. For example, nowadays, the times are somewhat different from the past. Now we have various means of communication, such as phone calls, WeChat messages, or sending text messages, including many modern communication tools that we have today. On one hand, we must understand that time truly is life itself. Therefore, for each and every person, they have their own study, contemplation, and practice to attend to, as well as many, many activities to benefit sentient beings. So it is absolutely essential that each person learns to treasure their own time. The great masters of the past, basically, would not waste even 1 minute, 10 minutes, or a quarter of an hour. Not even half an hour would be wasted by them. They would dedicate their time to truly meaningful activities, either spreading the Dharma or benefiting sentient beings, or engaging in study, contemplation, and practice. Therefore, each one of us should learn to be more thoughtful and considerate. If you yourself are particularly lazy and distracted, you need to remember that other people are not necessarily the same way. So you must be mindful of respecting the time of each person around you. I myself may be very distracted, but others are not necessarily distracted in the same way. This includes when we invite people to meals or when we simply gather together for some casual chitting. This also applies during the process of volunteer work. If you discover that someone is reading or studying, then everyone should show respect for that. Of course, regarding our volunteer work, the main portion of our time should be dedicated to the actual work we are volunteering for. If you delay all of your responsibilities and just spend all your time studying, I'm afraid this would also be unreasonable. What I mean is, in a situation where you do not delay your volunteer work, everyone should not abandon your study and practice of the Dharma. As I have mentioned before, throughout our entire life, study, practice, and benefiting others are truly the most important things. I just wanted to mention this here. Now, let me share with you an efficacy story from the records of Ksitigarbha's image. There are many historical accounts from that time period. Among these accounts, there is one in particular that tells of a time during the Tang dynasty when there was a person with the surname Li. She should have been a lay Buddhist practitioner. In her home, she enshrined a statue of Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva. It was a wood-carved statue of Ksitigarbha that was approximately 1 foot tall. In her household, there was a maid who was about 50 years old. This maid had no faith whatsoever, and moreover, she held very strong wrong views. On one occasion, when the house owner was away, the maid took advantage of this opportunity and threw the Ksitigarbha statue out of the house. She discarded it into a wild, desolate field. When the lady returned home, she had no idea that it was actually the maid who had done this. But when she discovered that the Ksitigarbha statue was missing, her heart was filled with great sadness, and she began to cry continuously. She searched everywhere for it, and during the process of searching, she suddenly saw light radiating in the wilderness. Following the light, she continued searching in that direction, and eventually she found the lost Ksitigarbha statue. She was filled with great joy and brought it back home. After bringing it home, the very next day, the maid became ill and passed away. Not long after her death, she came back to life again. When she came back to life, she wept as she recounted her experience. She said that after she died, 2 Yama gods riding on horses escorted her directly to King Yama in the Bardo realm. They declared that this was the person who had damaged the holy statue of Ksitigarbha and that she should be sentenced to severe punishment. When King Yama saw her and was preparing to punish her, suddenly a monk appeared before them. When this monk appeared, King Yama spoke to him very respectfully. During their conversation, King Yama asked him what had brought him to this place. The monk said, "The maid from my patron's household has arrived here. Although she herself was very dissatisfied with me and disliked me greatly, she is, after all, the servant of my patron. Therefore, I sincerely hope that King Yama will extend her lifespan and allow her to return to the human world." While they were having this conversation, the maid was, on the one hand, feeling deep remorse and regret, and on the other hand, she spontaneously began to recite to herself Namo Ksitigarbha Mahasattva. At that very moment, many sentient beings in the Bardo realm, including those who were shackled, found that their chains and fetters fell away on their own. Many of them were liberated as a result. After this, Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva brought her back to the human world. She then woke up. After waking up, she felt especially remorseful. From that time forward, she became particularly devoted, developing genuine faith and devotion toward Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva. She continuously made offerings to the statue in their household. Moreover, she continuously recounted her experience to all related people. She hoped that everyone would continuously develop faith in Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva. So the main teaching from this account is that through the inconceivable blessing of Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva, even when someone with wrong views damages his holy image, Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva does not take revenge, but instead continues to benefit that person. As it is taught in the way of the Bodhisattva, even if someone commits negative actions toward a Bodhisattva, they will still form a virtuous connection with that Bodhisattva. This is the meaning. If someone commits negative actions, the Bodhisattva will still establish a positive connection with them. In this way, for example, if someone in a household enshrines a statue of Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva, then those who have faith will benefit even more, needless to say. But even those who have no faith at all will also receive benefit. Regarding these kinds of efficacy stories, perhaps some of us with strong conceptual thinking may have doubts or may not quite believe them. This is also possible. However, the vast majority of people, especially many believers in the Han region, have great faith in the Ksitigarbha practice. And there are indeed many accounts and stories from different historical dynasties, including the Song dynasty and the Tang dynasty, as well as earlier periods, including the era of the Five Dynasties period. There are examples from many different time periods. So I believe that for those of us living in modern times, when I share these teachings with you, I mainly share efficacy stories from ancient times. Although there are also many modern efficacy records, sometimes with contemporary accounts, I am not certain whether sharing them would be appropriate or not. Therefore, when we study a particular sutra or follow a particular dharma practice, it is also necessary to understand more deeply how devoted the people of ancient times were. The people of ancient times, whether creating a statue, painting a mural, or copying a sutra text by hand, they approached these with such devotion, reverence, and prostrations. The results they obtained and the experiences they had were also described and recorded in written form, leaving behind especially precious materials for future generations. Perhaps many people in our current era, on the one hand because of high technology and the explosive amount of information available in all kinds of forms today, for these reasons, truly many of us in this lifetime do not know what kind of spiritual wealth we will leave behind for future generations. On this point, we can make a comparison. In the past, the flow of information was not as smooth and convenient as nowadays. Recording and preserving things were also not that convenient. However, the ancient people truly placed great emphasis on the accumulation of spiritual wealth. What did they value more? They value spiritual wealth more than material wealth. In our current era, whether in the East or the West, we probably place greater emphasis on material wealth. In this respect, the difference is quite significant. I have briefly shared with everyone some examples of the inconceivable blessings of Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva. Now let us continue with our teaching. In this chapter, the main focus is on Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva and Buddha Shakyamuni, as well as many Yama deities and ghosts and spirits and the various dialogues between them. Earlier, we discussed Ghost King Evil Poison. Although he is called Ghost King Evil Poison and his name sounds somewhat unpleasant, he is actually very kind. We discussed this earlier as well. Even if someone performs just a tiny bit of virtuous action, he will still very earnestly protect and support that person. The Buddha was also very pleased, saying that if this is the case, then he would also request Indra and Brahma to protect him as well. Therefore, sometimes when we look at the so-called ghosts and spirits or the so-called demons, they may appear very frightening in their manifestation. Their name, Ghost King Evil Poison, also sounds quite scary, but in reality, their hearts are actually very kind. Their actions are also extremely kind and benevolent. Everyone should be able to remember the story from before. Like following this, at that time there was a ghost king in the great assembly whose name was Ghost King presiding over life. He spoke to the Buddha saying, "World-honored one, what are my original karmic conditions? I primarily preside over the lives of beings in the southern continent of Jambudvipa. I am primarily in charge of the lifespans of beings in Jambudvipa, whether it is at the time of their birth or at the time of their death. I must attend to and manage all of these matters. At the time of birth, he is still in charge, and at the time of death, he is still in charge. Of course, he probably has a fairly large retinue, otherwise he would be quite busy. There are many children being born and many people dying as well. Today, someone dies in a car accident, tomorrow someone dies in an earthquake, and there are all kinds of situations. The lives of many sentient beings are primarily his responsibility. He first spoke about his original aspiration and his activities. He said, "My fundamental vow is to benefit these sentient beings as much as possible." What were his original intention and aspiration? Although he is Ghost King presiding over life, his motivation and his original vow are actually to benefit sentient beings. It is simply that despite his very good aspiration, many sentient beings do not understand his profound intention. He truly wishes to benefit sentient beings greatly, but these sentient beings are unable to comprehend his profound intention. This leads to many, many sentient beings experiencing no peace at the time of birth and also no peace or happiness at the time of death. Originally, this Ghost King is actually not a bad one at all. Although it may seem this way, the sentient beings of Jambudvipa have actually encountered someone quite good. Birth and death are the most important great matters of life. The Ghost King, who presides over life and death, actually has a good heart. He truly wants to help sentient beings, but the sentient beings themselves do not properly listen to his advice. As a result, they commit many negative actions. So we often say that if someone commits a great deal of non-virtuous actions, I am afraid that even the ghosts and spirits, the Dharma protectors, including the monastic Sangha, would find it very difficult to rescue them. This meaning is exactly like this. If the sentient beings themselves do not pay attention and do not properly create virtuous actions, then no one can save them. It becomes extremely difficult. So the main point here is that the sentient beings themselves do not properly perform virtuous deeds. This is the meaning. Why is this so? Why do sentient beings not listen? Why do sentient beings not understand your profound intention? He says the sentient beings of Jambudvipa, when they first come into this world, he addresses this from two aspects. First, what virtuous deeds should be done at the time of birth, and finally, what virtuous deeds should be done at the time of death. He explains from these two perspectives. First, he says that these sentient beings of Jambudvipa, when they first arrive in the human world, when they are first being born, whether they are male or female, if they are about to be born, if only virtuous deeds are performed, then this will increase benefits, including an atmosphere of virtue and goodness that can pervade the entire household. This causes the local earth spirits to give rise to immeasurable joy. They will protect the mother and child, enabling them to obtain peace and happiness and benefit the entire family. This is when the child is about to be born or has not yet formally been born, when the child is in the process of being born. If we perform some virtuous deeds and refrain from non-virtuous actions, in this way, we increase an atmosphere of virtue and goodness. When the atmosphere of virtue is increased, the local earth spirits, the worldly ghosts and spirits, and sentient beings all experience great joy. They will very earnestly support, protect, and safeguard the mother and child. In this way, the entire family will obtain happiness. This is one aspect. I have also taught this before. It is also mentioned in some Buddhist sutras that when some sentient beings first arrive in this world, if we create Buddha statues, hang prayer flags, or release captive lives, because of these actions, they will obtain prolonged life and longevity. In exceptional stories in sutras and Vinaya texts, there is also an account, and in other sutras as well, there was an 8-year-old young novice monk who lived together with an arhat elder. On one occasion, using his miraculous power, the elder observed that this novice actually only had 7 days left to live. He felt this was very pitiful, so he asked the novice to go home and see his parents. As a result, on the way home, the novice saw heavy rain falling. It seemed that an ant nest was about to be washed away. At that time, he used mud and earth to change the direction of the water flow, preventing the water from entering the ant nest. After staying at home for a few days, when he returned, the Arhat observed again and found that his lifespan had been extended to more than 80 years. The Arhat asked him, "What virtuous deed did you create? After you went home, what virtuous action did you perform?" He replied, "I didn't do anything special. I just released some lives." We can say it in this way. So sometimes in the Tibetan region, when there is heavy rain, generally the nuns and some monks, when they see that there are often some earthworms on the roads, after seeing them, they will bury them in the earth. Actually, this is also a form of life release. As long as we see individual beings who are in the midst of death, struggling for their lives, if you go and rescue them, this is also a very good form of life release. Moreover, when a child is born and arrives in this human world, relatives and friends should try their best to celebrate. How should they celebrate? Not by killing chickens, cows, or sheep to celebrate. If they do this, on the surface it may appear to be a celebration, but in reality, whether it is the mother or the child's lifespan will be greatly reduced. This is the truth. Ghost King, presiding over life, also feels very sad about this. Originally, he wants all these sentient beings to come properly into the human world and then live well afterward. Perhaps many of us who study Buddhism also feel this way. We feel that when a family gives birth to a child, they kill many lives. When the mother is in her postpartum confinement period, every day they kill one chicken. During that 1 month period, who knows how many chickens are killed? For example, when someone in the family dies, all the relatives and friends gather together and kill lives. This kind of practice can truly be said to be a situation where one's aspirations and actions are going in completely opposite directions. What result do they obtain? Originally, they want to obtain happiness, but instead they are creating the causes of suffering. This is truly frightening. So sometimes, sentient beings truly engage in behavior that is particularly problematic. Even Ghost King, presiding over life, finds it somewhat incomprehensible. He originally also wants to help others. Even the Ghost King wants to help others, but there is no way. How much more so for us Buddhists? We Buddhists truly sometimes see others killing lives, trying to extend their own lifespan in this way. This is especially unreasonable, but sometimes there is nothing we can do. We are also powerless. When a child is about to be born, if things are done in this way, it is also very bad. We should increase the power of virtue for them. In this way, everything will be very auspicious. In worldly sayings from the past, it is also taught that harmonious energy brings auspiciousness, violent energy brings calamity. If there is a harmonious atmosphere, what does this lead to? Auspiciousness. If there is violent or aggressive energy, what does this lead to? Inauspicious omens. If we kill lives and create negative karma, the circumstances that result from this are especially inauspicious or bring suffering. If we practice virtuous deeds and generate a virtuous mind, what does this bring? The result it brings is truly auspicious, harmonious, and filled with great happiness. Or if the child has already been born, you must be careful not to kill. If the child has already arrived in the human world, then you absolutely must not, under any circumstances, kill sentient beings. Do not obtain fresh meat to offer to the mother. If you prepare rare delicacies or fresh meat, especially very fresh flesh, to offer to the mother, and also gather relatives together, where everyone comes together as guests and orders animals to be killed, eating all kinds of food, drinking alcohol and consuming meat, gathering together to drink alcohol, smoke, and eat meat, and also singing and dancing with various musical instruments and entertainment, singing, dancing, or engaging in all kinds of entertainment activities. In this way, the mother and child will not be able to obtain peace and happiness, because killing sentient beings actually cannot possibly bring genuine happiness. In the past, there was a Bodhisattva named Great Courage who used the form of verses to write about matters of cause and effect. Later, it should have been translated during the Song dynasty. There is a text called the Condensed Sutra of Causes and Effects. It is called a sutra, but actually from what I have seen, it seems more like a treatise. It says, "For those who desire longevity, not killing sentient beings is the fundamental discipline." If you truly wish to obtain longevity, the best thing is to not harm lives, to not harm sentient beings. This is the most fundamental principle. If you, on the one hand, begin to kill sentient beings, while on the other hand want to obtain happiness, I'm afraid this would be very difficult. The Mahasamnipata Sutra also teaches that each one of us, just as we love ourselves. Actually, all sentient beings love their own lives. If we kill other sentient beings and trample upon their happiness in order to maintain ourselves or to obtain happiness for ourselves, this is fundamentally an impossible matter. Therefore, we should try our best. If we want the child to be happy or the mother and child to be happy, we should truly try our best not to eat meat or drink alcohol and so forth. If it is truly impossible to accomplish this during that period, it is best not to order animals to be killed. For example, if you use meat that is stored in the refrigerator or something else, relatively speaking, this might be slightly better. Previously in my text, The Merit of Life Releasing, I cited Master Lianqi's teachings from On Stopping Killing and Releasing Life. At that time, he taught from 7 different aspects, believing that truly, whether it is celebrating birthdays, the birth of children, hosting banquets or weddings during these times, we should try our best not to kill lives, because your happiness is built upon the suffering of other sentient beings, and moreover, this suffering is not ordinary suffering, it comes at the cost of precious lives. You will certainly experience karmic retribution for this. Therefore, perhaps many of you who are present here, before you studied Buddhism or before you became monastics, you may have created a great deal of negative karma. When we reflect upon our own lives, perhaps sometimes you can remember certain things while sometimes you cannot remember them at all. However, due to the conditions of your own traditions, your parents' preferences, and your own body, you may have created a great deal of negative karma. If we do not quickly confess and purify this, and we leave this world, it is very difficult to say whether we will have opportunities to confess in the future. Therefore, each person should not be particularly arrogant, thinking, after I studied Buddhism, every negative karma has already been completely purified. Because I study Madhyamika and the Great Perfection, in the primordial wisdom mind, everything is completely non-existent. In the primordial wisdom mind, everything is indeed completely non-existent, but in the appearances, we still live in this phenomenal world. If we have not departed from conventional phenomena, actually, this karmic cause and effect will never be exhausted. This karmic cause and effect will never disappear. Karmic cause and effect is infallible. What we create ourselves, we must experience ourselves. No one can overturn this principle. Therefore, it is very necessary for us to constantly reflect upon our own lives. Each person can also examine themselves carefully. Although today I am vegetarian and I am still studying Buddhism, before this, both what I know and what I do not know, there should be a great deal of karma accumulated in my alaya consciousness. Moreover, not only in this present life, but even from many lifetimes before, there are some karmic seeds that have not ripened and continue to exist there. Therefore, regarding some matters, we fundamentally do not know. Now, some people say, why is it that after I studied Buddhism, I practice virtuous actions every day now, yet my health is still not good, and there are still many, many unhappy things that continue to happen one after another. Doesn't this mean that good deeds bring good results, evil deeds bring evil results is unreasonable? This kind of person's way of thinking is truly ignorant and short-sighted. They think that good deeds bring good results, evil deeds bring evil results, only refers to immediate retribution in this life. They fundamentally do not understand that since beginningless time, there is so much karmic existing in non-obvious ways as karmic seeds hibernating in our alaya consciousness. On this point, we should also deeply contemplate. Personally, I also often think in this way. For example, for many years, my health has not been good. Every time my health is not good, I think that perhaps the karma I created in this present life, especially regarding killing, should be very minimal. Basically, I cannot remember any. However, I deeply believe that in my previous life or the life before that, I certainly harmed the lives of sentient beings and caused harm to them. Therefore, today I'm experiencing this karmic result. This is not merely something I say verbally. In my actual conduct, I do not think, I am so unlucky. The 3 jewels have not provided any blessing. I do not think in this way at all. I never think these things. When I look at some of the previous great masters, such as Gotsangpa Gompa Dorje, in their biographies, every time they encountered happiness, they felt it was the blessing of their guru. But what is even more extraordinary is that every time they encountered suffering, they still felt this was also the blessing of their guru. Perhaps many of us think that happiness is the blessing of our guru. Everyone probably thinks this way. This is the blessing of my guru and the 3 jewels. Today I feel very comfortable. But when I am suffering, do I think, the blessing of the 3 jewels? Today I am suffering. I am truly so grateful to my guru. I am very much suffering. In this regard, many people's method of contemplation is probably somewhat lacking. But actually, we truly do need to contemplate in this way. If we contemplate in this way, on the one hand, we can say, the blessing of my guru causes me to suffer. By making me suffer, I develop tremendous renunciation towards samsara. The suffering I would have experienced in hell in a future life is now ending through this brief suffering in the human world of this present life. Thinking in this way is also very beneficial. So why is this the case? As we just discussed, if one creates negative karma, the mother and child will both be unhappy. Why is this so? Because at the difficult time of childbirth, nowadays it might be slightly better, perhaps when giving birth in a hospital. But in the past, it was truly just as Guru Rinpoche said. At that time, it seemed that both the mother and child were approaching death and experiencing tremendous suffering. At this time, there are countless evil ghosts, extremely numerous evil ghosts, as well as goblins and spirits, which is to say various ghosts and demons. They all absorb vital energy and consume various things. What do they consume? The foul blood at that time. They themselves all enjoy these things. At this time, Ghost King presiding over life, whom we just discussed, has already arranged for the local earth spirits in advance. He dispatches the earth spirits to that place and requests them to protect the mother and child, enabling them to obtain happiness and benefit. Actually, at the time of each person's childbirth, Ghost King presiding over life arranges some local ghosts and spirits to protect them, ensuring that both mother and child are well and the child is delivered smoothly. When these people see the peace and happiness of mother and child, because both mother and child are happy, they should establish and cultivate merit and virtue. For example, as we mentioned, offering butter lamps, creating statues, as well as reciting sutras and mantras, they should establish merit to express gratitude to the local earth spirits. They should create some merit to express their thanks to the earth spirits he dispatched and the local Dharma protectors. Actually, when such ghosts and spirits are dispatched, we should help them by practicing some virtuous actions. In this way, it would also be beneficial for them. However, the situation is not like this at all. Instead, they kill sentient beings and gather relatives together, killing many lives, drinking alcohol, singing and dancing, and engaging in all kinds of activities. Because of these kinds of matters, actually, they bring misfortune upon themselves. In the end, including their relatives, the mother and child themselves, what do they bring about? They bring about the experience of suffering. In the end, perhaps both the mother and child may die. Even if they do not die, they may continuously suffer from illness. Therefore, the Sutra of the Medicine Buddha also teaches, and other sutras also teach, that at the time of a child's birth, it is best if the mother or other people recite the Sutra of the Medicine Buddha, recite the name of Avalokiteshvara, or recite the mantra of Avalokiteshvara. In this way, it will be extremely beneficial. Generally speaking, for example, in the Tibetan region, when children are born, when the mother and child's health has recovered somewhat, they will immediately go to monasteries to perform virtuous deeds. Then they will request monastics to perform bathing rituals or blessings, recite some sutras, or confer longevity empowerments. Actually, all of these practices are in accordance with the teachings of the Buddhist sutras, and they also accord with the relationship between local ghosts and spirits. We can say this creates a kind of harmony, a kind of coordination. This is still a very beneficial kind of condition. What does this kind of condition bring? It brings happiness for both oneself and others. Actually, what we have taught today is actually also a kind of practical Buddhism for daily life. People are very concerned about safety, as well as health and freedom from illness. Moreover, every family is probably very concerned about the birth of children. However, what they are concerned about and their own behavior often go in completely opposite directions due to our ignorance or not understanding the law of cause and effect. This is truly very pitiful. Therefore, now that we understand how to discriminate what to adopt and what to abandon, we as monastics should encourage our relatives and friends to perform virtuous deeds and to refrain from non-virtuous deeds. Some may listen to us while others may not necessarily listen. But if they do not listen, you also do not need to feel particularly sad or complain. I think this is also unnecessary. What should you do? You should care for them and encourage them to practice virtuous things. In this way, both mother and child will have this opportunity for happiness. And then continuing on, it says, moreover, for sentient beings of Jambudvipa at the time of death, whether they have created virtue or created non-virtue, Ghost King presiding over life wishes to help these dying sentient beings avoid falling into the lower realms. Whether they have created virtue or not created virtue, for all these sentient beings, whoever they may be, you can see that this Ghost King presiding over life is actually quite good. Therefore, sometimes we see the so-called asuras, or some among them. They may appear fiery, their names may be scary, but among Ghost Kings, there are also some who are relatively kind. Even those who have created non-virtue or who have partially created virtue, if he is unwilling to let these people fall into the lower realms, let alone those who have cultivated roots of goodness themselves. Moreover, cultivating such roots of goodness increases his ability to help. Ghost King presiding over life feels that as long as other sentient beings create some virtuous actions, he will have a kind of power. I also mentioned earlier that if each one of us sentient beings practices some virtuous actions, it truly increases a certain auspicious atmosphere. For example, in our world, if everyone practices virtuous deeds, the power of the ghosts and spirits who protect virtuous deeds will be enhanced. If all of us sentient beings create negative karma, then those ghosts and spirits who cause harm to sentient beings, their power will become strong. Therefore, if everyone practices virtuous deeds, my power will also be increased. Moreover, this person's own mind and power will also be increased. There is a text called the Buddha Speaks of Fearlessness Sutra. It is in the Chinese Tripitaka. It should have been translated by Dharmaraksha. There's a verse in it that says, I abandon all evils and practice all virtues. If we abandon all that is evil and practice all virtues, for this reason I have no fear in my life. Because of this reason, we will not suffer from any fear, whether at the time of death, at the time of birth, or during ordinary daily life, because you abandon evil and practice virtue. In the atmosphere of abandoning evil and practicing virtue, actually in our life we will not suffer from any fear. If we frequently create non-virtue and our practice of virtue is also extremely weak, in this way, perhaps in this present life, we could be afflicted with mental illnesses such as depression, phobia, or various kinds of unknown illnesses that entangle our bodies, and we are frequently unable to find freedom. Even if occasionally we are slightly normal for a bit, we are still frequently bound by afflictions or by ghosts, spirits, and demons. Our aspirations and our actions have no way to be consistent. This can happen. For the sentient beings of Jambudvipa who practice virtuous dharma, at the time of death, there are also hundreds of thousands of evil ghosts and spirits from the lower realms who transform into the forms of parents or relatives and come to welcome the deceased, causing them to fall into lower realms. How much more so for those who have created non-virtue? This is also something we have discussed in some tantras and teachings on the bardo. Generally, when a person is departing, actually that scene is quite complex. At that time, if the person has practiced virtuous deeds, generally they are not easily tempted. If the karmic force is quite heavy and moreover their own wrong views are also very strong, in this way at this critical moment there are extremely many evil ghosts. On the surface it seems they are your parents, your wife, your husband, your relatives appearing in their forms. Actually, they are not the genuine appearances. Especially when we human beings are alive, we are particularly attached to our parents, particularly attached to our relatives and friends. When you are dying, because of the projection of your attachment, they will appear as the person to whom you are most attached and then come to welcome you. The result is that they are not welcoming you to a pure land, but rather taking you to the lower realms. How much more so for those who have created negative actions? For those who have created negative karma, this is even more likely to happen. At that time, it is quite complex. Therefore, while we are still alive, we should diligently practice the contemplation of death and impermanence. Moreover, at that time, we must pray very deeply to our Guru and the three jewels. Moreover, when we receive empowerments, we have secret names. At that time, if we ourselves are about to fall into the lower realms in our bardo state, our root Guru will also call us using our secret names. If we generate tremendous faith in him at that moment, even if we have already gone astray, our Guru will guide us across. Therefore, this is very critical. All of this is what Ghost King presiding over life says. He says, World-honored one, for such men and women of Jambudvipa, at the time of death, actually, the situation is very terrible. The consciousness is confused and dim. Moreover, at that time, they have no way to distinguish between good and evil. Even the six sense faculties, eyes, ears, nose, tongue, body, and mind, are also unable to see or hear. This, of course, is probably at the beginning when the four elements are dissolving. There are many stages in the process of dissolution. At the beginning, when approaching the appearance of the bardo, it seems that at that time there is a particular stage. The original mental state is gone. One's red and white elements would meet at the heart. The consciousness would enter into them, whereby a state without any thought is experienced, and then one would faint away into a state of utter darkness. There is also this stage. Of course, when he has reached the bardo state, generally speaking, as many sutras and tantras say, that he would be many times cleverer and his memory would be many times better than while he was alive, and he can see and hear at much greater distances. Of course, here it is probably because the death and after-death experiences can be a relatively long process, and each sentient being would experience them differently due to their individual karma. Therefore, here in the text, Ghost King presiding over life mainly stresses the situation that people in the bardo state will experience, such as fainting, inability to distinguish good from evil, and inability to see or hear, and so forth. At this time, if their relatives begin to make great offerings and recite sacred sutras such as the Diamond Sutra, the Sutra of the Medicine Buddha, or the Great Liberation through hearing in the bardo, and also recite the names of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas for him, in this way, through these wholesome conditions, the deceased will be able to depart from all the lower realms, and moreover, all the ghosts and spirits at that time will completely withdraw and disperse. This is still very important. For some of us, truly, don't pay much attention to these practices when their family members died. This is a great pity, because at the time of departure we can say that everything, absolutely everything, must be abandoned. Originally, no matter how many high-class villas one had, or what kind of luxury cars, not even a single needle or thread can be taken along. At that time, what do they need most? What is most needed is merit. Therefore, many Vajra friends, when people around them are dying, will chant prayers for them and frequently go to help them. This is very good. This is also something that is extremely, extremely needed. For example, in the Tibetan region, I truly feel that perhaps because faith is more widespread, for instance, when someone is about to die, his family members will certainly invite many, many monastics to come and begin reciting the Great Liberation through hearing in the bardo for 49 days. Even before the person has stopped breathing, they will already perform virtuous deeds such as making offerings to monastics or requesting monastics to recite sutras. Generally, in our customary way of speaking, perhaps this person will not be able to live any longer. There is basically no hope of survival for them. And so they begin to invite monastics to come and recite sutras. This is a very habitual practice in daily life. But this kind of habit is also very important. In Tibetan, there isn't exactly one, but it is somewhat different. There is a sutra on impermanence translated by Yi Jing. In the sutra on impermanence, it says that when a person is about to die, they should lie on their right side, and they should be shown images of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. Then they should generate bodhicitta, take refuge, confess, recite the Buddha's name, and observe precepts. Actually, such sentient beings will not fall into the lower realms. In the Sutra on Impermanence, when you have the opportunity, you can also take a look at it. It is actually very important. There's a verse at the end that says, "For the deceased, read the Sutra on Impermanence." It requires that the Sutra on Impermanence be recited, which is very beneficial. Previously, we had the Noble Mahayana Sutra, the Wisdom of the Hour of Death. That very short, Noble Mahayana Sutra, the wisdom of the hour of death that we taught before. A few years ago, I taught it, right? The Noble Mahayana Sutra, the wisdom of the hour of death, also contains extremely profound teachings. How does it teach? For the deceased, read the Sutra on Impermanence. Filial children should stop grieving and not continue to weep and wail. For the sake of the deceased, it is best to recite the Sutra on Impermanence. If one is a filial child, a devoted child at that time, they should try their best to stop their grief and sorrow and should not cry loudly. This is also very important. Therefore, generally, many Buddhists will also say, when someone is dying, don't cry, don't cry. Actually, this has a scriptural basis, because sometimes what some Buddhists say seems to have no basis whatsoever. Whatever they think eventually becomes some kind of statement. For example, some people say, you cannot recite Sur offering prayers, otherwise ghosts and spirits will naturally come, so it is very dangerous. You cannot recite them. All of these statements, if ghosts and spirits want to come, they have miraculous powers and can come whenever they want. But if you make offerings to them, they will certainly not harm you, no matter what. Therefore, some of the folk sayings we have nowadays and some worldly sayings, some of them have scriptural basis and are quite reasonable. For example, as we just discussed, not crying at the time of death. This kind of saying is reasonable. For example, it is customary among Tibetan Buddhists that one should not make prostration to his guru when he is about to leave for another place. This also has many instances I have seen in the biographies of some previous gurus, because when departing they prostrated to their guru. Later they never saw their guru again. In some cases it truly is their level of practice and realization, or we can say it is a kind of life experience. Some are also found in the sutras, but some are folk sayings without reliable basis. Here it teaches that when a person has not yet stopped breathing or has just stopped breathing, it is best to recite sutras for them or recite the names of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. Our custom in the Han region is still a very good custom. Everyone recites the names of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas for them, reciting Amitabha Buddha. I think this is very good. Ghost King presiding over life says, "World-honored one, for all sentient beings at the time of death, if they are able to hear the name of one Buddha or the name of one Bodhisattva, for example, the name of Amitabha Buddha, the name of Buddha Ratnasiki, the name of Buddha Shakyamuni, or the name of one Bodhisattva, such as the name of Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva, the name of Avalokiteshvara, the name of Mahastama Prapta Bodhisattva, and so forth, or one sentence from a Mahayana Sutra, one sentence from the Diamond Sutra, or one sentence from the Ksitigarbha Sutra, or let us say one verse. All compounded phenomena are like a dream, a magical illusion, a bubble, a shadow, like dew or a flash of lightning. Thus should you contemplate them. In this way, I observe that such a person, except for the offenses of the 5 crimes of immediate retribution, regarding other small non-virtuous karma that would ordinarily cause them to fall into hell or the lower realms because of the power of this virtuous dharma, they will very quickly obtain liberation. Truly, sometimes for us, when we see other sentient beings struggling when they are dying, we will also recite the names of Buddhas for them. This is all very necessary. At the end of 2018, once I went to see a doctor, at that time it seemed there was a flu going around. I was in the Han region and I could not recover for a very long time. Very early one morning, there was also no major hospital nearby, so I went to a clinic nearby. There were many people at the clinic. I kept waiting in line for a very long time. Finally, when it seemed like it was my turn, they said that someone nearby nearby needed emergency rescue, and then the doctor immediately stood up and ran over. In the end, I had no choice but to continue waiting in line. I then went to another queue and waited for more than another hour. Then, when it was my turn again, another person appeared and they began emergency rescue, saying this person was about to die. I eventually realized that I would not be able to see a doctor that day. I was quite seriously ill, but then I just went over. Both corpses were lying nearby. I went over to recite sutras for them. One family seemed to have some faith. Another family did not have much faith. They looked at me with a very dissatisfied attitude. One family was relatively more receptive. In any case, I went over there and recited some sutras for them, and then I went back. That day, I didn't manage to see a doctor. Sometimes for us, it may also be like this. It is not the case that someone else requests you to go. If they do not request you, whether it is human beings or when other sentient beings are dying, we will go and try our best to guide them across. We will try our best to recite the names of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas for them. Here it teaches that even just one sentence or even one verse would generate great merit for the dying. There is a sutra called the Mahayana Vaipulya Sutra of Treasure Light of Dharani. In Tibetan, there is also a translation. In this sutra, it teaches, if at the time of death one recites the name of a Buddha or sees the image of a Buddha and generates love and respect, if at the time of death one has recited a Buddha's name or has seen the image of a Buddha and generated faith toward it, the Buddha will go there to rescue them. The Buddha will rescue them. All Buddhas will teach the Dharma to him. In the end, the Buddha will also transmit the authentic Dharma to them and enable them to obtain liberation. Therefore, reciting the names of Buddhas also has inconceivable merit. This is about the names of Buddhas or Bodhisattva. There is also what I just mentioned. One sentence or one verse can generate inconceivable benefit. Previously, in the brief records of efficacy of the three jewels, there was a lay Buddhist who at that time had faith in Buddhism, but he did not accept a principle from the Nirvana Sutra that hearing the word permanence could lead to liberation. In his heart, he felt that regarding the permanent Buddha nature, hearing the word permanence could lead to liberation. Not necessarily. If we read this entire sutra, we still may not necessarily obtain liberation. He continuously harbored doubt. Later, this person died. After he died, it seemed that for a very long time his chest did not become cold. In this way, the people in his family did not dare to handle the corpse. After approximately 7 days, he was resurrected and told his experience to his family. When he was in the bardo and was about to receive punishment in the Avicii hell. At this time, King Yama said to him, "You have very strong wrong views toward Mahayana Buddhism. You will fall into the Avicii hell." He thought to himself, if I fall into the Avicii hell because slandering the Dharma brings this negative karma, then practicing virtuous deeds, perhaps in the past I also heard about the permanent Buddha nature. In this way, perhaps I will not fall into hell. At this time, in the vast expanse, a voice was heard saying, whether you believe it or not, as long as you have heard the word permanence, whether you have faith or you do not have faith, as long as you have heard the word permanence, you will certainly not fall into the lower realms, but rather take rebirth in the pure land of Akshobhya Buddha. After hearing this voice, King Yama released him and sent him back. After he woke up, he continuously shed tears and recounted his experience. From then on, he generated genuine faith in Mahayana Buddhism. The Uttaratantra Shastra also frequently teaches about the terms such as Ksitigarbha, Buddha nature, untainted Buddha nature, and so forth. On the surface, it may seem like just 2 words or 1 sentence or the merit of 1 verse. It may be somewhat difficult to accept. That person also harbored doubt, thinking, it is hard to say whether one can obtain liberation by reciting 1 complete sutra. How could it be a term or a sentence like Namo Buddhaya has such tremendous power? Actually, it is not a matter of being more or less. For example, some medicines, although they appear to be very, very small pills, but after you take them, perhaps your extremely serious illness will be completely eradicated. This has extremely inconceivable power and blessing. Therefore, here it also has already taught that if we see sentient beings at the time of death, truly reciting the names of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas for them, and if we have the opportunity reciting some sutras for those people around us, if they are departing, we should still try our best to help them. This is truly very important, especially for some of our Dharma friends around us, whether they are Buddhists or non-Buddhists. We've often encouraged chanting prayers for the dying in the past. Chanting prayers is extremely meaningful, whether for the deceased or for the family of the deceased. It is extremely meaningful. On the surface, we may think, today we go somewhere to recite the Diamond Sutra, recite the Amitabha Sutra, or recite the Ksitigarbha Sutra. It takes very little time. But actually, the benefit it brings to them truly changes their entire destiny. Because we recite the names of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, they will not need to fall into the lower realms for many, many eons. This merit is truly inconceivable. Therefore, as Buddhists, we should have devoted faith. Faith is the mother of all merit. Everyone should also be clear about this. If we do not have such faith truly, perhaps through academic study or through ordinary conceptual thinking and measurement, many of the profound truths may be impossible for us to truly grasp. Therefore, liberation in Buddhism is primarily established on the foundation of faith. Faith is extremely important. This above section has mainly discussed Ghost King presiding over life and how he relates to sentient beings of Jambudvipa, how he benefits those sentient beings who are being born and those who are dying, and how he treats them. The explanation has been completed. Next, the Buddha said to Ghost King presiding over life, because of your great kindness and great compassion, you are able to make such vows. This is truly inconceivable. You continuously protect these sentient beings amid their births and deaths. On the surface, you are a ghost king, but actually you are a genuine great Bodhisattva. You have made such tremendous vows, and moreover, you are in the most critical positions. Sometimes, when we have some leaders who are in the most critical positions, they are still quite reliable. Therefore, some ghosts and spirits have been assigned to the critical juncture of birth and death in Jambudvipa. These ghosts and spirits are still very important. If in future times there are men and women, whether at the time of birth or at the time of death, you absolutely must not retreat from your vows. You may be quite exhausted. As we just discussed, no matter how well you treat the sentient beings of Jambudvipa, not only do they not repay your kindness, but they may even bring you all kinds of troubles. However, because of this reason, the Buddha told him, you should still continue to serve there diligently. You should continue to remain there. Although sentient beings are very stubborn and difficult to tame, very troublesome, you absolutely must not retreat from your vows. Liberate all these sentient beings to ultimately obtain liberation and enable them to obtain happiness forever. Therefore, the Buddha once again reminded Ghost King presiding over life, you absolutely must not lose faith. Actually, in Mahayana Buddhism earlier it was also taught, do not retreat from your initial aspiration. Here it also teaches, do not retreat from your vows. Many of us at the beginning, due to different conditions, may generate these supreme aspirations, but later, when encountering all kinds of situations, whether it is temporary volunteer work or long-term activities to benefit sentient beings, it is very easy to retreat from such aspirations. If we encounter Buddhas and Bodhisattvas who remind us, we ourselves will not retreat from our faith. Therefore, sometimes we require everyone to listen to teachings and frequently be in contact with spiritual friends and Dharma teachers, because our own ability is limited. Moreover, we are not like Bodhisattvas whose minds are very stable and very calm. We are not like that. We are frequently shaken by external circumstances and frequently change. At this time, reminders like those from the Buddha are of course the best. If we do not have reminders from the Buddha, although the Buddha is giving reminders to Ghost King presiding over life, indirectly speaking, this is also for us. As long as these are activities to benefit sentient beings, we should try our best not to lose faith, not to retreat from our aspirations. Even if we can only do a little bit of work for a short period of time, it is still extremely important. The Ghost King said to the Buddha, Buddha, you do not need to worry. Please do not have any concern. Buddha, you do not need to worry. Until the end of my present form, in our Vinaya, we often speak of until the end of the present form. Throughout my life, I, this Ghost King, as long as my physical form exists, will support and protect the sentient beings of Jambudvipa in every thought and find ways to enable them to obtain happiness in all circumstances at the time of birth and at the time of death. Buddha, you do not need to worry. Please be at ease. You see, the followers of the Buddha all said to the Buddha, please be at ease, I will serve diligently. There will be no problem. As long as I am here, there will be no problem. Therefore, whether ghosts or spirits, everyone made such promises. But I still have one wish, just one. I hope that at the time of birth and death, these living beings will believe and accept my words. They must believe me. Because some sentient beings do not believe or do not listen to some of what he says. He said, whether at the time of birth or at the time of death, do not create negative karma. You should practice virtuous dharma. Do not kill. All of these are the requests of Ghost King presiding over life. But he said, as long as sentient beings regarding matters of birth and death listen to my words in this way, there will be none who do not obtain liberation, none who do not gain benefit. All will obtain genuine happiness. This is the Ghost King's promise to the Buddha. At this time, the Buddha said to Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva. Now Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva comes forth. He said, this great Ghost King, presiding over life, has passed through hundreds of thousands of lives as a great Ghost King, supporting and protecting living beings amid their births and deaths. He has served as a Ghost King, supporting these sentient beings hundreds of thousands of of times. This great being, the Buddha, also called him a great being. That ghost king is like Mahastama Prapta Bodhisattva. This great being's loving kindness, compassion, and aspiration are especially powerful. Because of this reason, although he manifests as a great ghost body, sometimes the appearances of Dharma protectors, their external manifestations, may appear to be demons or ghosts and spirits. But actually they are not ghosts. Actually they are not ghosts. There is no need to be afraid. Therefore, sometimes for us we may say, ghosts have come. Will there be ghosts? Will there be demons? In their form they may appear with fierce features, extremely frightening, but actually some are truly more compassionate than us human beings. Whether we human beings pay attention to the birth and death of all sentient beings is also hard to say. After 170 eons, he will attain Buddhahood. His Buddha name will be signless Tathagata. You see, this ghost king is very extraordinary. His kalpa will be named peace and happiness, and the name of his world will be pure dwelling. At that time, the lifespan of that Buddha will be incalculable eons, extremely, extremely long. Then the Buddha told Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva, this great ghost king is actually like this. He has inconceivable aspirations, inconceivable compassion, and inconceivable power. Moreover, the number of devas and human beings he guides across is also immeasurable, extremely, extremely numerous. Therefore, today we discussed here Ghost King presiding over life. We should understand that there are actually many such beings in the presence of the Buddha. On the surface, they appear as Ghost King Evil Poison or Ghost King presiding over life, but actually they are all engaged in activities to benefit sentient beings. Therefore, we may also understand that whether earth spirits, Dharma protectors, mountain spirits or tree spirits, or this ghost king or that ghost king, many ghost kings participated that day, but among the ghost kings there, most of them are good ghost kings who should possess bodhicitta. In this way, we also do not need to be afraid. On the one hand, the so-called ghost kings truly have kind intentions and benefit sentient beings. Also, we can regard all the so-called ghosts and spirits as illusory manifestations of our own mind. They will also not cause you any harm whatsoever. Do not think that everything exists in a world of ghosts and spirits, thinking this is also a demon, that is also a ghost, this is also a bad person, that is also an evil person. In this way, our world will become filled with enemies. Ultimately, all appearances are pure by nature, and all appearances should be transformed into the appearances of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. Actually, this is the practice of practitioners who have attained a very high level of realization. May we all strive to attain such a state of realization. That concludes today's teaching.
Sonandai Tanche Rupaya Tonani Dejana Pasi Jirgana Jirano Chupai Jupun Sonen Droa Droa
Bandarangara Badna Asadorda Bandarangara Badna Asadorda Bandarangara Badma Asadorda